Hey friend, in this video, we are going to be talking about how everything you think you know about art is completely wrong. I know that's a very bold statement, but when I came to this realization in my own creative practices, it completely changed the game for me. So to give you some context, I have been dabbling with art supplies, playing piano, singing, cooking, doing photography, and grew up in a very highly creative environment from early childhood. My mom was a model, she was a film photographer, screen printer, she was into gardening and sewing and all things artistic and creative. And so I was very immersed from an early age in a lot of different creative practices. And this, I didn't really realize how influential it was for me in my artistic journey, my journey with watercolor, until a couple years ago when I hit a huge creative rut where I just felt like I was lacking inspiration. I felt really uninspired and apathetic in my watercolor journey and just felt like I wasn't really growing. So if that's you, if you're feeling kind of stuck and you're not really seeing any growth in your artistic journey, then let's talk about it. So when you are learning a new medium or you're exploring watercolor or any specific medium, oftentimes a lot of beginners, and at any level really, people get stuck on just hyper focusing on that medium specifically. So if I'm a watercolor artist or I'm getting started in my watercolor journey, I will go on YouTube, I'll go on Pinterest, I'll go on Instagram, or wherever I find my inspiration, and I will look up watercolor paintings or watercolor tutorials. And that is, in my opinion, one of the first steps that a lot of people get wrong, is relying solely on inspiration sources that come directly from the medium themselves. So my first lesson or tip for recovering from any sort of creative block or any sort of apathy or lack of inspiration in your creative journey, whether it's watercolor or acrylic painting or whatever, is to go outside of the medium to find other inspiration sources that light that creative flame or that spark within you to then source that inspiration for your watercolor paintings or whatever medium you practice. And this can be one of the greatest ways to expand your creativity, not just in watercolor or in the medium of choice, but in every aspect of your life. So one source of inspiration for me that I love to go to is music. I grew up playing piano, I grew up singing, and there was a period of my life where I didn't have a piano in my house for about 10 years. And I found that I was lacking this place within myself that just I didn't feel inspired. I was no longer feeling kind of energized around my creative practice, my art practice, my watercolor practice. But then about a year ago, I finally bought a keyboard and we brought the keyboard in the house and I started playing piano more and singing more and exploring this influence that was so big in my life, especially in my childhood. And that drastically changed even the way I thought about my art practice, my watercolor specifically. It charged me up and it fueled me to bring out new ideas and visualization, and it allowed my inspiration and imagination to run wild and to be playful again. So my biggest lesson or takeaway for getting out of those creative ruts is to first find those outside influences. There are so many examples of this in artists from the past that have gone before us, like Pablo Picasso, like Matisse, and all of these different artists that have had their hands in different mediums than the one that they're known for specifically. So for me, it's music, and I also love to write. I love to write poetry. I love to just journal and write and purge out all of the emotions or stories that I want to tell. And this just starts to get the mind churning a little bit, the visualization parts of your brain and the imagination centers in your brain. Another great way to find outside influence in your art practice is through travel. So I love immersing myself in different cultures. I travel and teach art retreats all across the world every year. For example, next month, or this month actually, in the next couple of weeks, I will be headed off to France to teach an art retreat in the south of France. And that is just such a great way to find inspiration through the antique shops, the cafes that you wander into, the museums, the churches, the old architecture, and the way they used to build and shape and sculpt things that are so amazing and beautiful and treasures of this world, really, can be so influential in your art practice if you take the time to notice. So one huge step that a lot of people are missing in their creative journey is not only not having the cross-disciplinary influences like other mediums, but also taking the time to notice and look at the world around you and actually have the artist's eye. So when I'm on my trips, traveling abroad and teaching these art trips, I love going to museums. I love looking at art, but also looking at the tile patterns in cafes, or looking around at what people are wearing and actually noticing the color palettes, the style. Is it vintage style, or is it more classic or more modern? And having that start to get my wheels turning in my brain for inspiration of how I can incorporate that in the stories that I tell on paper. So for me, whenever I hit a creative rut or I'm feeling like I'm just lacking inspiration, I don't know what to paint, the first step is to not go online. It's to not look at inspiration from watercolor artists or watercolor tutorials. That serves a purpose. If you're trying to learn a technique and develop muscle memory in a specific area of your watercolor journey or your artistic journey, then that's what tutorials are for, and copying and replicating and tweaking and making it your own. That's exactly what that's for that learning process. But when I'm trying to find what my voice is with my own art, or I'm trying to come up with my own ideas for what I want to paint, oftentimes the inspiration comes from outside the medium. I'll go for walks, on my little nature walks, I'll take photos, I'll even listen to podcasts about other random topics, about other people's creative process, and start to get the wheels turning and more inspiration around how I can piece together those thoughts and ideas on my own piece of paper with my paintbrush. Since using outside influences like music, like poetry, one of my favorite poets, by the way, is David Whyte. I love his poetry, and it's one of the biggest areas a few years ago when I started really studying his work, where I noticed a huge difference in my artwork, in my inspiration, and how easily it was for me to turn inspiration into something on paper. And so look for those outside influences. It might not be music for you. It might not be poetry for you. It might be cooking. It might be textile design. I don't know. But just explore, allow yourself to think differently, to think outside the box. That is what artists are here to do, is to think outside the box, to connect the dots between mediums and between influences and ideas, and to collaborate and make them their own. And that's the beauty of creativity, and it will allow you to expand into your own creative potential if you allow yourself to just get your head off of your table or your eyes off of your paper and having those blinders on and just solely focusing on watercolor or whatever it is you're focusing on, and to look at the world around you and to be a noticer. I would love to hear from you. Share in the comments below how your own creative practice has expanded and what outside influences really help influence your own artistic journey. I'm sure it will help other people who are scanning the comments to look through. And if you want to learn my entire creative process and how I take these outside influences, collaborate them together, mix them together to create my own ideas for paintings, then check out my course, The Art Within. It goes in very, very big detail. It goes in depth on this whole entire creative process of finding your style and using your voice with your paintbrush and using art as your medium for expressing yourself. And if you want to start just learning more watercolor techniques, I've got a free ebook for you as well called The Complete Beginner's Guide to Watercolor. So we'll link to that as well in this video. As always, thank you so much for watching these videos, for engaging, for leaving comments, for liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.